When detectives know where a crime occurred, they comb the area for evidence. Usually, they uncover more than meets the eye. Using the latest technologies, law enforcement agents team up with forensic scientists to solve challenging cases. The science of forensics analyzes clues to reconstruct past events. One of the most important pieces of evidence lies at the tips of our fingers. Fingerprinting began over a century ago when scientists discovered that no two people have the same print. Over the years, experts devised a complex system for analyzing fingerprints based on three patterns: the loop, the arch, and the whorl. Fingerprint expert Wally Briefs explains.
The loop, you will see them flow in and flow out, and just loop. The arch, just a gentle arch. They'll flow in and just flow out the other side. And the whorl, it lives up to its name. It's a circular, whirling pattern. And those, everyone has.
Experts distinguish any two prints by looking for tiny imperfections, such as ridges that end abruptly or ridges that split and form little dots.
It's those features and their location on your fingerprints, on your palms of your hands and soles of your feet, and their relationship to each other that make it individual to you and only you in the whole world.
The traditional method for recovering a print uses black powder and tape. The human touch leaves behind traces of sweat that the powder adheres to. The tape lifts the powder along with the print. New technologies enable detectives to recover prints from a crime scene years after the crime occurred.
Hit the lights, let's fire this up.
Okay, you got it.
Fluorescent powder and a high-intensity laser light reveal evidence even the best investigators used to miss. For decades, police had the tedious job of eye-matching each print to one of thousands of samples on file. Now computers can capture, analyze, and match a fingerprint against a database within minutes. Finding evidence is often like looking for a needle in a haystack. From this debris, chemists extract a single carpet fiber. Tiny filaments like this offer valuable clues because they can link a suspect to specific locations. Fibers recovered at the crime scene might have come from a suspect's home. Sometimes an unusual piece of evidence helps solve a crime. These detectives notice a tire track on the side of the road near the crime scene.
This is going to be a good one here.
After measuring and photographing the area, they make a mold or cast of the markings. An expert is called in to identify the tread marks and the kind of tire that made them. He finds distinguishing features on the surface of the tire that might trace them to a suspect's vehicle. Forensic science makes it possible to solve tough cases with unlikely and often tiny pieces of evidence. Breakthroughs in the area of genetics have revolutionized the criminal justice system since the early 1980s. Of all the evidence left during a crime, nothing is tougher to refute than DNA. Every cell in the human body contains DNA that carries genetic information. A single strand of it looks like a twisted ladder held together by chemical rungs. The sequence of the rungs is unique for each person. Since people at the scene of a crime usually leave behind some of their cells, forensic scientists can gather DNA evidence. They remove DNA from the cells and through a complex laboratory procedure make key segments of it visible on X-ray film. Showing up as black bands, the film reveals the chemical patterns of a person's unique DNA structure. The patterns may link a suspect to the crime or exclude that suspect altogether. The DNA on the left was found at a crime scene, while the sample on the right was taken from a suspect. If the two match and the evidence is intact, the chance of error is remote. This method helps investigators go back in time. Take the case of Dr. Sam Shepard.
All of Cleveland awaits an answer to the question, who murdered Marilyn Shepard?
In 1954, he was accused of murdering his wife and imprisoned for 10 years. But his son remained convinced of his father's innocence. Science stepped in years later to solve the case. Forensic experts analyzed blood from the crime scene and found that the DNA did not match Sam Shepard's or his wife's DNA. The tests cast grave doubt on Sam Shepard's guilty conviction. Someone else most likely committed the crime. As his attorney, F. Lee Bailey, can attest, DNA evidence is powerful enough to reopen old cases and help solve unsolvable crimes.
DNA evidence properly handled, tests properly conducted, is extremely reliable. The odds are astronomical that it was or was not this person. So it is a definitive way of excluding people, and that has been its principal benefit.
The FBI considers DNA its most powerful tool. It is now standard procedure for detectives to scrape items at a crime scene to gather this evidence. Samples are stored in CODIS, a computer database, and matched against thousands of others in the system. As remarkably accurate as DNA analysis seems, the possibility of human error still exists. Because the evidence is easily contaminated, investigators and scientists must use extreme care when handling the samples. Almost everyone is familiar with the painting of the Mona Lisa by the Italian master Leonardo da Vinci. He was one of the greatest artists of the Renaissance, but experts believe fewer than a dozen of his paintings survive today. Art collector John Harrington thinks he discovered one of them. For $3,500 and the diamond ring on his finger, he purchased a painting found in an attic that had been owned by one family for centuries. He thought it might be Da Vinci's depiction of a biblical scene known as Christ Among the Doctors. Some art historians wrote that Da Vinci painted an image of Christ in 1504, but they were skeptical that this was the image. If authentic, it would instantly become one of the most valuable paintings in the world. A masterpiece worth millions. If not, it's a fabulous forgery. To help determine its origins, Harrington called Walter McCrone, one of the world's most respected forensic scientists. McCrone had analyzed hundreds of paintings using techniques he pioneered. First, he examined the paint itself. Using a small needle, he extracted tiny samples. Since every color of paint comes from a different mineral or vegetable base, each one has a unique appearance under the microscope. With a stereoptical microscope, often used by surgeons, the pigment particles become clear. In Da Vinci's day, paint pigments came from a variety of sources. Rocks, minerals, and plants were the most common. These paints were often lumpy because the pigments were ground by hand. Today, rollers smooth things out so artists can spread color evenly. The microscope let scientists like McCrone link pigments to specific times when they were manufactured.
each pigment, we know when it was first used. Prussian blue, for example, is 1704. If I find Prussian blue in a painting, I know that at least that paint layer had to have been painted after 1704.
In Harrington's painting, all the pigments could be traced to Da Vinci's time. Macrone had once analyzed Da Vinci's masterpiece, The Last Supper, and saved some pigment samples on slides. These were almost identical to those found in Christ Among the Doctors. To back up his findings, he also examined the pigment's binding agents and pieces of the canvas. Both tests supported the theory that the painting was completed during Da Vinci's time. But was it the work of Da Vinci's hand? To answer this last question, Harrington let scholars scrutinize the brushstrokes and details in the picture. Many art historians believe it's the real thing, but others think it could be the work of a Da Vinci student or other copycat. While forensic techniques are promising, even the best of them can't solve every mystery. The debate surrounding this painting goes on.
Locking in, yes, these ruddy faces.
Mummies, an ancient civilization's beliefs wrapped up in one artifact and preserved for eternity. They provide us with valuable insight into long-lost cultures. People in ancient cultures often honored their dead through mummification, by embalming a body or treating it with preservatives. Today, scientists study these remains to answer questions about the past.
Got some hair there. That's all right.
By examining human bones, they can determine the age, sex, and diet of the person, and even how that person died.
You're going to have that side.
Of all the mummies ever discovered, perhaps the most talked about is that of Tutankhamun, better known as King Tut. Archaeologists discovered his tomb in 1922, 3,000 years after his death. Up until then, this Egyptian pharaoh was relatively unknown. Tut was only 19 years old when he died, and the circumstances surrounding his death remain a mystery. Early clues reveal that Tut may not have been popular among the ancient Egyptians. Compared with the tombs of other pharaohs, he was buried with surprisingly few riches. And his name does not appear on the hieroglyphs that depict other Egyptian rulers. Recent X-rays of the mummy show evidence of a blow to the back of the skull, dislodging a small piece of bone in the process. It suggests to forensic scientists that someone might have murdered King Tut. Across the globe in Chile, mummies thousands of years older than King Tut's tell another story. By examining the skull of a male mummy, scientists see a bone deformation around the ear. These people probably fished for food in very cold water, and constant exposure to cold may have caused the abnormal bone growth. Further analysis of these mummies show bones full of nitrogen deposits that most likely came from a diet heavy in seafood. A diet of fish also helps explain why these people had such strong and healthy teeth. Studying mummies helps forensic anthropologists better understand life in ancient cultures. Mummies will always fascinate us. And as technology improves, scientists continue to unravel many of their secrets. An inferno can erupt in a matter of minutes, leaving behind little more than a burned-out shell. That's where the experts come in. Investigators sift through the ashes to determine if a fire was an accident or a crime. Thanks to the latest forensic technologies, they can build a solid case from the rubble. When someone sets a fire intentionally, it's called arson, and it's often meant to destroy evidence of another crime. Fortunately for investigators, all is usually not lost. Traveling from the least burned areas to places where the fire was the most intense, investigators move backwards through the scene. They search for clues each step of the way. Some of the evidence tells them how hot the fire was. Other signs indicate the direction the flames traveled. Here, fire marshals see evidence of a liquid poured on the floor. Many flammable liquids leave a charred edge where the heat was especially intense. Using the forensic technique of gas chromatography, the marshals find out what the accelerant was. John DeHaan and William Kennard explain.
Gasoline contains somewhere between 100 and 200 different components. We think of it as a single liquid, but it's a very complex mixture. Gas chromatography allows us to separate those all out, and in this case we're looking at molecules and sorting them out on the basis of their size.
Almost invariably there is some of the accelerant left, possibly highly evaporated, but still enough for us to analyze. We can analyze anywhere from 1 part to 100 parts per million.
Determining the cause of a fire is one thing, but finding enough evidence to catch a criminal suspect is another. Fortunately, experts can pull fingerprints from the soot and water. Most of us would guess that fingerprints don't survive a fire, but the fire's intensity actually makes prints stick to many surfaces. New light sources can highlight fingerprint residue against complex backgrounds. Pieces of glass can reveal if someone broke in before the fire or if the heat broke the glass. Under a microscope, the answer becomes clear. Curved lines around the edges mean the glass shattered on impact. Smooth edges mean a fire caused the break. So if you think an entire crime can go up in smoke, think again. With forensic techniques like these, investigators and scientists can tell how and where a fire started, and even who lit the match.